Hi, guys, and welcome back to our Because of WinnDixie book club. We're on chapter 5 today, so make sure that you've listened to 1 through 4 first, um, especially because chapter 4 was pretty good. We learned 10 things about our main character, Opal's mama, who really Opal hasn't met before. She left when she was really young, so she doesn't know her all that well or really at all. So we learned some good things and some not so good things about her. I'm interested in reading that discussion board I put up for chapter 4 for us to start and hear your thoughts about Opal's mom. And if maybe she was what you predicted she'd be, or maybe a little different. Um, in it, I was looking for some vocabulary maybe we didn't know or we wanted to pull out, and the only one I really saw was this word, constellation. And a constellation is just a group of stars in the sky, and they usually make a picture. And it's not such an obvious picture that you can just look up and see like you would in a coloring book or something like that. But it's more of a connect the dot picture. And people used to use constellations a very long time ago to navigate and to kind of give them directions. When they didn't have maps or anything, they would use the stars and they would use constellations. And the most known constellations, I think, are typically people's zodiac signs. If you've heard of your zodiac sign, there's always a constellation that goes along with it, and you can find it in the stars. So, a constellation, just kind of a picture or a group of stars that make a picture. Other than that, though, I think most of the vocabulary used in this piece of that past chapter, sorry, was a lot of vocabulary we knew already. Um, I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into chapter 5, I think, because I'm interested to see where we go. It looks like when Dixie and Opal just ran in her room and wrote down all those things about Mama. And I'm interested to see where it goes from here. If we're going to learn any more or not. Let's see. WinnDixie couldn't stand to be alone. We found that out real quick. If me and the preacher went off and left him by himself in the trailer, he pulled all the cushions off the couch and all the toilet paper off the roll. So we started tying him outside with a rope when we left. That didn't really work either. WinnDixie howled until Samuel, Miss Detweiler's dog, started howling too. It was exactly the kind of noise that people in an all-adult trailer park don't really like to hear. He just doesn't like to be left alone, I told the preacher. That's all. Let's take him with us. I could understand the way WinnDixie felt. Getting left behind probably made his heart feel empty. After a while, the preacher gave in, and everywhere we went with WinnDixie, even to church. The Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi isn't a regular looking church. The building used to be a Picket Quick store. And when you walk in the front door, the first thing you see is the Picket Quick motto. It's written on the floor in little tiny red letters that make great big letters that say, pick, 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 quick, quick, quick. The preacher tried painting over those tiles, but the letters won't stay covered up. And so the preacher has just given in and let it be. The other thing about the Open Arms is that's different from other churches is that there aren't any pews. People bring their own folding chairs and lawn chairs, and sometimes it looks more like a congregation is watching a parade or sitting outside at a barbecue instead of being at church. It's kind of strange, and I thought WinnDixie would fit right in. But the first time we brought WinnDixie to the Open Arms Church, the preacher tied him outside the front door. Why did we bring him all the way here just to tie him up? I asked the preacher. Because dogs don't belong in a church, Opal, the preacher said. That's why. He tied WinnDixie up to the tree and said how there's lots of shade for him and that it ought to be a real good spot for him to lay. Well, it didn't. The service started and there was some singing and some sharing and some praying. And then the preacher started preaching. And he wasn't but 2 or 3 words into his sermon, and there was a terrible howl from outside. The preacher tried to ignore it. "Today?" he said. "Ow!" said WinnDixie. "Please," said the preacher. "Ow!" said WinnDixie back. "Friends," said the preacher. "Ow, ow, ow!" wailed WinnDixie. Everyone turned their lawn chairs and folded up their chairs and looked the other way around. "Opal," said the preacher. "Ow!" said WinnDixie. "Yes, sir," I said. "Go get that dog," he yelled. "Yes, sir," I yelled back. I went outside and untied WinnDixie and brought him inside, and he sat down beside me and smiled up at the preacher, and the preacher couldn't help it. He smiled back. WinnDixie had that effect on him. And so the preacher started in his preaching again. WinnDixie sat there listening to it, wiggling his ears this way and that, trying to catch all the words. And everything would have been all right, except for that mouse that ran across the floor. The open arms had mice. They were there from when it was a picket quick, and there were lots of good things to eat in the building. And when the picket quick became an open arms Baptist church of Naomi, the mice stayed around to eat all the leftover crumbs from the potluck suppers. The preacher kept on saying he was going to have to do something about them, but he never did. Because the truth is, he couldn't stand the thought of hurting anything, even a little mouse. Well, WinnDixie saw that mouse, and he was up and after him. One minute everything was quiet and serious, and the preacher was going on and on and on. The next minute, WinnDixie looked like a furry bullet shooting across the building, chasing that mouse. He was barking and his feet were skidding all over the polished picket quick floor, and people were clapping and hollering and pointing. They really went wild when WinnDixie actually caught the mouse. "I have never in my life seen a dog catch a mouse," said Miss Nordley. She was sitting next to me. "He's a special dog," I told her. "I imagine so," she said back. WinnDixie stood up there in front of the whole church, wagging his tail and holding the mouse real careful in his mouth, holding on to him tight but not squishing him. "I believe that mutt has got some retriever in him," said somebody behind me. "That's a hunting dog." WinnDixie took the mouse over to the preacher and dropped it at his feet. And when the mouse tried to get away, WinnDixie put his paw right on the mouse's tail and then smiled up at the preacher. He showed him all his teeth. The preacher looked down at the mouse. I looked at WinnDixie, and he looked at me. He rubbed his nose. It got real quiet in that picket quick. "Let us pray," said the preacher finally, "for this little mouse." And everybody started laughing and clapping. The preacher picked up the mouse by the tail and walked and threw it out the front door of the picket quick, and everybody applauded again. Then he came back and we all prayed together. I prayed for my mama. I told God how much I would have enjoyed hearing the story of how much she would enjoy hearing the story of WinnDixie catching that mouse. It would have made her laugh. I asked God if maybe I could be the one to tell her that story someday. And then I talked to God about how I was lonely in Naomi because I didn't know that many kids, only the ones from church, and there wasn't that many at the open arms, just Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry, two brothers who weren't twins but looked like they were, and Amanda Wilkerson, whose face was always pinched up like she was smelling something real bad, and Sweetie Pie Thomas, who was only 5 years old and still mostly a baby. And none of them wanted to be my friend anyway, because they probably thought I'd tell on them to the preacher for every little thing they did wrong. And then they would get in trouble with God and their parents. So I told God that I was lonely, even having WinnDixie. And finally, I prayed for that mouse, like the preacher suggested. I prayed that he didn't get hurt when he was flying out the door of the Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. I prayed that he landed on a nice, soft patch of grass. The end of chapter 5. We're on to chapter 6 in our next video, so get on to that one quick. Hopefully I'll be putting it up fast. I hope you liked that ending. It was a pretty funny one, I think, with Winn-Dixie. Imagine him running around in that Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. Kind of had me giggling. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Look out for those comprehension questions, okay? And I'll see you next chapter.